Alright guys, here's a pretty boring subject, but wanted to go through a little bit how to disable password authentication on a Contabo VPS. I'll just jump right in. What we're trying to do here is, if you've got a Contabo instance set up and you have your SSH key set into PuTTY, let's say you don't though, so it can't find my file, so I'm labeling it wrong here, and I hit open. If it doesn't have your SSH key, it does a fallback to password. So right now, password authentication is turned on, which is insecure. Someone can attempt to log in remotely, brute force it. It's just not a good, um, there's no strength to having this enabled. It decreases your security risk, or decreases security. So what we want to do is we want it to fail if it doesn't have your SSH key. All right, so we've got a few steps to work on to get this going. So let's get into Contabo. Here is your virtual machine. Go into it here. Let's first of all check if your SSH key is installed here. I don't have any passwords installed here. I don't want to use passwords. My SSH key, I have added my SSH key. I put a name here. I copied my public key. So I have to put this public key onto any machine. I call it whatever. I'd save it so that's here, so that any machine that I install through Contabo, I can add this SSH key. Let's go back into our VPS here. I want to make sure that my security credentials are installed, so let's reset our credentials. I'm not going to put a password in. I'm going to install an SSH key, the one that I stored just now. Let's reset your credentials and let's confirm it. Okay, so right now it's resetting that based on their end. They've got access to the back end, which also makes password authentication insecure because somebody else always has access. So now let's go back into here. Let's duplicate this, and now it's going to use my SSH key since that's how I have it programmed. Actually, I'll start over for you. Here's PuTTY. Let's go to my Contabo. Let's load it. Double check that my private key location is actually here, and it is. So let's open it. I've got my private key that requires a password. So anybody that were to steal my public or my private key would also have to know a pretty long password in order to use it. And it logs right in. Let's see what happens if I don't have my SSH key now. That's not what I wanted. Let's do a new session. Let's go into my Contabo, go into my credentials, and let's say my key was not there or invalid. I'm going to give it the wrong file location. Right now, I am getting a password prompt. So it does not inherently disable password authentication when I don't provide a password. That's what we got to fix. So we've got this guide that Bernie put together. Under these advanced users, we want to get into this SSHD config. We want to create a new file here. Actually, step 4 is what we want to do, and add these two authentication parameters into that, and then restart our SSH. So let's get into that. So what do we have in here right now is we have some cloud config init scripts. If I go up a directory, this is their original config. Let's look at this config file. It is including the directory sshd config.d and everything.conf. Okay. That means that these files in here are all being used. Well, let's look at them. This one is allowing password authentication. 60 has nothing in it. I typed it wrong. There. It tells us no, it's not allowed. Okay, what's that mean? Well, it's going to use the first setting it finds. So it found 50 first, and then it found that enabled it, and then it found 60 that disabled it. But it's going to use a conflict, it's going to use the lowest. So what we actually want to do then is create one that's lower that tells us don't use it. And that just keeps stuff cleaner so you know what's theirs and what's yours. So let's copy this. Let's call this file, and you can call it something else if you want. That way you know you added it. You can add whatever title you want to it. And let's save those two tags in there. Save it. And let's restart SSH services. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to bring up a new session alongside of this. And I am going to go back to my Contabo. I'm going to give it an invalid SSH key again and open it. I'm getting the password prompt. I'm going to restart SSH in this instance. And now I'm going to check my status. It shows that it restarted 8 seconds ago, so it did what I wanted to do. Let's restart this. Let's duplicate this. So now it popped up out of the window here, but it popped up and immediately disconnect the session. It says there's no supported authentication methods because the server is looking for a public key. What that means is that in lieu of finding a valid key in here, if I have an invalid key, then it was going to try to go to password before. Now it's not. Now it just kills it. If it does not have a valid SSH key, it is not going to look for a fallback password. That's what we want to happen. And so now if it has a valid key, then I get the normal prompt over here that's asking me for my password for my SSH key. But if it doesn't have an SSH key, it will just fail to connect at all. That is what we want. So hopefully that helped somebody out and made stuff a little more clear. Let me know if you need more information.